Okay, we just got the last couple here. Well, I don't know if it's the last couple, but we've got a couple more joining. I'll keep an eye on the room to continue to admit people, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'd like to recognize that we are on Treaty 8 lands in the traditional territories of the Fort Nelson First Nation. The Chamber of Commerce is hosting this meeting on behalf of Peak Renewables to provide an opportunity for the public to hear about the Peak Renewables Pellet Project and to provide an opportunity for questions. Before turning the platform over to Brian Barta with Peak Renewables, I would like to mention a few kind of housekeeping items. The meeting is being recorded and it will be broadcast on the Chamber YouTube channel, which is a publicly available channel. In order to keep background noise to a minimum, we have muted participants, and we're asking that you please use the chat room for questions. If you're experiencing any bandwidth issues, I would recommend you turning off your video. That does seem to help because that is often an issue for us. And then I'd just like to add that please note this is an opportunity to ask questions. It's not a platform necessarily for expressing your point of view or engaging in a debate. It's about getting information about the project. Please ensure questions remain respectful and do not attack the integrity of either Peak Renewables representatives or the Chamber. If we run out of time, I will ask Brian to forward answers to any of the remaining questions. So we'll keep a track of the questions that are coming into the chat room, and we'll make sure that we get answers to everything. And with that, I'd like to thank Brian and turn the virtual podium over to him.
Thank you very much, Bev, for your introduction. Thank you for hosting this virtual town hall. We're happy to be here tonight. We look forward to hopefully helping people understand a little bit more about our project, and certainly we're available to take more questions as time passes and we continue developing this project. We're happy to be here, as you can see right on the headline here. We're happy to be here in conjunction and in partnership with the Fort Nelson First Nation. Two people that will also be talking tonight is Rick Jacquard, one of the members of our team, and I'll introduce some of our other team members as well. And James Tate, I expect will also say a few words as a representative of the Fort Nelson First Nation. So again, thank you very much for hosting this, Bev. We appreciate you putting this together. And we also appreciate it being at a time that more people can make it, as opposed to the typical chamber lunch meetings that we've done several times already. So again, thank you very much. If I can get you to move to page 2. So a little bit about Peak Renewables. We're a bioenergy company, a startup bioenergy company that produces industrial wood pellets to replace coal and power generation plants. Wood pellets are a renewable, sustainable energy source. Biomass provides consistent renewable power that complements the intermittent energy of wind and solar. And pellets also meet the CO2 emission targets as set out by government policies. Our target is to finish construction by Q4 of 2021 with full operation by Q1 of 2022. With the change in some of the consultation time periods that is occurring with both the First Nations and part of this process with the Bill 22, we expect it might get extended a little bit. As important as all of that is the fact that there will be 350 jobs, including the logging and hauling. So roughly just over 60 in the plant itself. And then we're expecting about 300 jobs in the logging and forestry operations side. And we believe that will produce 150 secondary jobs as well. Next slide, thank you. So Peak Renewables, our goal is to work with BC communities and First Nations to make sustainable renewable products that reduce the carbon footprint of today's energy needs by utilizing marginalized trees, forest residuals, and other biomass that would otherwise go to waste. So we believe in sustainability. We believe in growing local communities, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Our founder, Brian Fair, has been heavily involved in growing local communities throughout his career and life. And we're also going to be partnering with the Indigenous folks in the areas that we do business. Next slide. So here's a few of our team, and I'll go through it just briefly. Brian Fair, chairman of our company. He's well known in British Columbia for actually developing jobs in many of the smaller communities. So Vanderhoof is a town that he's worked in extensively. He's worked in Prince George. He's developed operations in Canal Flats, British Columbia, and we recently started up a finger joint plant in Cranbrook. So in each case, we're taking areas that there used to be a sawmill and repurposing it and developing jobs. So for example, Canal Flats is a good place to use as an example where as a sawmill, that place operated and had roughly just over 50 jobs. And today, if you went to visit that site, you'd see 60 plus jobs with an average wage that's higher than what was paid there back in the day. Cranbrook's another one. We just started up that a finger joint plant in that area. And previously it had been operated by a company that went out of business, went bankrupt. And today we're at probably about 15 employees with an expectation to grow to 30 in that particular spot. So those are just a couple of examples of what we've been able to do in some rural communities, and the example of what we'd like to see happen in Fort Nelson as well. And obviously, as we talk about it, the pellet plant itself will be 60 people, and then the harvesting and jobs above and beyond that will be another 300. So Brian Fair, he also was the owner and founder of Bid Group that designed and constructed pellet plants, sawmills, and OSB facilities. Myself, CEO of Peak Renewables, previously the CEO of Paper Excellence. Fred Spinola is our Chief Technical Officer, so the engineer that's going to put this whole project together, design and build it, and has many years of experience in wood products mining and developing this type of project. And then Stephen Tolnoy, the guy that's in charge of getting the offtake agreements in Japan. Next slide. So Rick Jacquard, who will speak in a few minutes, is our Chief Forester. He used to work for a company called Timber West, has been involved in creating many First Nations agreements, partnerships in coastal BC. He's also a registered professional forester. Our General Counsel, Doug Hammond, CFO, John Broer, and our Head of Finance, Grace Waranata. Next slide. So what we're looking at is a commercial scale whitewood pellet plant, initial site in Fort Nelson, BC. As everyone knows, 600,000 tons per year. And so what we've been able to do is purchase the old Canfor site where the OSB facility was, and also the Tacoma site, which we expect to use as a log reload yard. And we expect that we'll be doing ocean freight through Prince Rupert or Vancouver, probably more likely Prince Rupert, but backup option is Vancouver. And that would be, all of the product would be railed through Fort St. John and then over to Prince Rupert or Vancouver on the rail line. So one of the questions that I think many people are asking, how is the rail line and what is it able to handle all of this product? Clearly, in order for it to start doing this amount of tonnage, or regardless whatever tonnage it is, it does need an upgrade, and we're in discussions with CN on that upgrade. And certainly from our point of view today, that's looking good. And that is one of the reasons people ask, well, why a 600,000 ton a year site versus, or tonnage versus something smaller? And part of it is we need to have a certain scale in order to make sure that all the other parts of the investment can make sense, such as the rail connection, particularly through to Fort St. John. One of the challenges that we've seen in Fort Nelson is that over the last 12 years, there's been literally minimal activity in the forestry area. And my understanding is a number of people have looked at it, but have never been able to come up with an economic solution for the wood. And one of the issues is that there's beautiful softwood saw logs there. There's also some really nice high value aspen, and then there's a bunch of lower quality aspen. And again, it's difficult to economically harvest the wood if you don't take the entire profile of the wood. And so what the pellet plant does is actually deals with that lower value wood that has been hard to deal with in some of the other things that other people have looked at. And so we're able to take the entire profile, and we'll market the softwood saw logs. We're hoping to be able to market the high quality hardwood to be either furniture stock. We're talking to some veneer producers, and then obviously for the lower value hardwood, we'll be using that in the pellet facility. So we've had considerable incoming interest since we've discussed this pellet plant. We've been talking to a furniture manufacturer. We've been talking to an aspen veneer opportunity. We've also been talking to people that are interested in potentially canting, so softwood logs, turning them into cants, which would be then shipped for remanufacturing down south. And we've also we've had people talk about turning the softwood saw logs into veneer as well. So far, we haven't seen any of them firm up. But what I would say is, to the extent that we're able to turn one of those into reality, that would benefit the wood pellet plant as well. So our goal is our plan is to construct a modern, high efficiency pellet facility. Initial shipments of product will begin in Q1 of 2022. And as I've said earlier, 500 direct and indirect local jobs. So we're we're pleased that we've been able to take the project to this point, and we look forward to continuing on. Next slide. A few other highlights, and probably the most critical highlight is that we've developed a equity partnership with the Fort Nelson First Nation. So we've signed an MOU. The proposal is that they'll take a significant equity portion of our project that could grow over time into control of the project. So some of the questions that are being asked is, should the regional municipality and the Fort Nelson First Nation control the tenure? And the reality is, through this project, they can and will and do have heavy involvement and control of the tenure. So we've asked for extensive tenure and tenure, and we'll be doing the low value whole log chipping, as I mentioned. We got a leadership team with lots of experience. As I mentioned, to bring this thing to fruition, we'll need to negotiate long-term offtake agreements. And the difference between this and something like OSB that Fort Nelson previously had, OSB is a very cyclical type of product, and typically goes through really high highs and then really low lows. And a number of facilities in BC have shut down, such as the Fort Nelson, the Fort St. John, which is now the subject of a restart announcement, and also the Ainsworth facility, OSB facility in 100 Mile House, ended up shutting down again for lack of access to economic fiber and due to the cyclical nature of that business. So what's good about the pellet industry is typically negotiate long-term offtake agreements that have typically a 20-year lifespan, and what that creates is stability for community and for the Fort Nelson First Nation for a long period of time. which we think is beneficial. We also will be using a brownfield site, which has existing rail infrastructure, road and rail infrastructure. And as I discussed briefly previously, we're working on the rail and terminal opportunities. We believe we'll get the rail redeveloped, so back up to an operating capability that that supports more industry in Fort Nelson. And we'll also be looking at terminal opportunities, developing our own terminal. We're using a dryer technology that reduces energy requirements and emissions by up to 30%. Next slide. So plant equipment designed with state-of-the-art equipment to reduce energy requirements and emissions particulate by up to 30%. This is a European drying technology, maximizes output, minimizes waste and particulate emissions, and exceeds best practices in the wood pellet industry. And plant will be powered by clean hydro. Next slide. So this team and a couple of the individuals, Brian Fair and our CTO, Fred Smanola, Chief Technical Officer, have been involved over the years in building many plants. And here's just a brief synopsis of the plants that have been built by them over the past year. So lots of experience, lots of capability in terms of building a state-of-the-art facility. Next slide. And just a little bit on the market demand. Pellet demand continues to grow. In 2012, it was 19.5 million tons. Today, it's 37.3, or 2018. And we expect to see continued growth in Japan, particularly. And the average demand per year is running at about 2 million tons per year. And one of the things that's driving that demand, and we know Japan here, is they are looking at net zero by 2050, bringing in a national carbon tax. And it is also the place where many of our competitors are focused. Ideally, we'd be shipping these to, if we could, within Canada, to places that are using coal. But so far, Canada hasn't adopted policies that drive us in that direction. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick Jacquard, who's going to talk about fiber supply, and then he'll be followed up by James Tate, who will offer a few other comments. Over to you, Rick.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Again, Rick Jacquard, my name, Chief Forester with Peak Renewables, and thank you for having me here today. Next slide, please. In terms of resource management, of course, in addition to managing to all relevant forest legislation and regulations, we're going to be managing to the requirements of a very unique set of needs and priorities as defined by our business partners, Fort Nelson First Nation. I'll be speaking in more detail in the next slide, but there is a framework called the Land Management Framework. Again, I'll get into that here in a moment, but it's generally a set of policies around sustainability, around stewardship, all built by FNFN with support from a team of resource specialists and also FNFN community members have been very much a part of developing this framework. In terms of sustainable resource management, as Brian said, a big part of the sustainability of the management of the lands is to create a market opportunity for the full profile of the products that the forest can offer. So it's saw logs going to lumber mills, it's peeler logs going to plywood producers, it's chips going to pulp and paper producers, and then of course the low end or the low grade deciduous logs that otherwise don't have another market is where we would be targeting or focusing for pellet production. It's the right log to the right mill is what we believe in, and that's what our resource management priorities are going to set out to do. In terms of certification, we're obviously not there yet, but we will be working towards SFI certification. That's Sustainable Forestry Initiative. It's a third-party audited environmental certification regime. Next slide, please. To get into the land management framework in a bit more detail, what the LMF requires is a very early on collaborative planning effort between Peak Renewables and Fort Nelson First Nation. This is well ahead of any approvals being granted. This is well ahead of any ribbons being hung out there, and obviously very much ahead of any operational activity occurring out there. The intent behind the LMF is to look at the interface between short and long range harvest plans with the known cultural and environmental values. And when we talk about that, we're talking about an inventory, a database, a map layer of cultural values as defined by Fort Nelson First Nations within their traditional territory, things like historic use areas and travel corridors. It's also all about caribou range protection and the protection of other wildlife features, riparian values, old forest retention, and the connectivity between ranges and old forest areas, and also the protection of existing trap lines, very much a part of what the LMF stands for. We are currently engaged with Fort Nelson First Nations lands and stewardship team. We're in the middle of producing a 20-year spatialized harvest simulation model. This will be something that will be fully costed out so that we have some sense, some comfort into what the cost of fiber will be coming into the pellet plant. Next slide, please. And in terms of fiber supply, where is the wood going to come from? The project tenures consist of 2 tenures, all within the Fort Nelson timber supply area. There is the CAN4 replaceable forest license that is currently the subject of a Bill 22 review. And then there is an additional forest tenure that's under discussion between the project team, partnership team, and the province. There also, in terms of where the fiber supply will come from, it is our intent to provide a market opportunity for other minor tenures, existing and future, into the future that will have a component of their forest profile that otherwise has no viable market opportunity. And there'll also be a market for open market purchases. So if there's private land or people who have agricultural lease lands or possibly some timber sales, that kind of thing, our company will be always there and available to purchase that type of fiber as well. And as Brian said, we do expect to develop and promote other business opportunities to add value in the harvest profile. And as he said, we are in active discussions with a number of different entities, anywhere from the furniture stock right through to guitar stock and rig mats and custom cutting arrangements. There's a list of opportunities that we are continuing to explore. At the low end of the profile will be the logs that otherwise don't have a viable market for, and that's where we'll focus for the pellet plant mill furnish. One thing I will say as well, the need to burn slash, we believe that in our harvest operations, there will be much less need to do open burning to alleviate forest fuel hazard accumulations and to burn slash in order to provide plantable area for reforestation purposes. With the fact that we're going to be managing the harvesting to such tight utilization standards, we feel that there'll be much less smoke in the air each fall. And I think sustainability, I talked about the land management framework and sustainable forestry initiative. I've been through that. So that concludes my piece of the presentation. Back to you, Brian.
So James, did you want to say a few words? James Tate? You're on mute, by the way. You'll have to.
There, I got the go ahead to unmute there. Thanks very much. Thanks, Brian. Thanks very much. And I know many people who are on the Zoom tonight, but for those who don't know me, I'm James Tate. I'm legal counsel with the Fort Nelson First Nation, and I've been working with FNFN over the last several years on developing forestry initiatives. And I know from the nation's perspective that really the ideal balance is being sought. People know that FNFN are fierce defenders and stewards of the land and water in FNFN territory, but also are seeking balanced and sustainable opportunities for their people and for members. And so there's a criteria of balance that's being sought in the kinds of forestry initiatives that FNFN has been involved in. And of course, one of the really important ones that's happened over the last couple of years has been the involvement in the Community Forest Initiative with the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, the NRM. And of course, that has resulted in an award that represents the largest community forest license in the province. That's been a very good collaboration. And the partnership with Peak Renewables is part of that, striving for that balance of sustainable jobs and development as well on FNFN's part. There's, as Brian mentioned, features that really FNFN sees as part of their suite of interests: the equity position, the ability to be involved in the governance of the project, the ability to not only have employment opportunities and contracting opportunities, but to be able to have members and people train and develop capacity over time in a way that ultimately will allow FNFN to be able to own opportunities outright. And both Rick and Brian have mentioned the importance of more value-added opportunities that will flow from this project as a foundation. I know that that's a core interest for FNFN as well, and I think very much an interest to be involved in the development and operation of those kinds of secondary opportunities, or I shouldn't even say secondary, but value-added opportunities that will come from the project. And Rick has done a good job of talking about the land management framework. This is a framework that goes well beyond the legislative requirements of the Forest and Range Practices Act. And the idea of developing this 20-year long-term harvesting plan and to the extent possible, integrating a wide range of traditional cultural use and ecological values at the front end of the planning process really does represent a best practice in forestry management in the province. It's something that really is unprecedented in the way it's being approached. And I think that's a really important fact to know about the way that the project, the consideration that's being given to the ecological factors around the project as well. I think I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Brian and Rick.
Thank you, James. Bev, did you have anything else you wanted to mention before we move to questions?
No, do you have a couple? I still see a couple more slides here, Brian. Did we cover pretty much?
Yes,
thank
we
you.
did, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'll leave that up there so people have your contact information. And then I'll pull the chat back up and, well, actually, if everybody's okay with it, I'll just quit screen sharing and then we can see the chat a little easier. Give me a second. I think all this stuff would be second nature by now. So we do have some questions, and I'm going to go way back to the beginning of your, when you first started talking, Brian. So the first question is, what defines a marginalized tree?
Yeah, good question. So in Fort Nelson, we've done a little bit of initial harvesting on, well, one of the folks in the community has done a little bit of initial harvesting. And what you see in some of the aspen is it looks really good on the outside, but tends to have some rot on the inside. So that would be something I'd call a marginalized tree. So it's unable, as you harvest it, it's unable to be used for what I'd call a higher and better use. It's unable to be used for wood products. It's unable to be used for a veneer. So as we harvest that type of wood, it would go directly to the pellet plant. The other piece, and when you look at a tree, so even a coniferous tree is typically got a couple of saw logs on it. So and then it would typically have the top would be something from about a 4.5 inch top. Above would be something we call a pulp log, and that would get utilized in the pellet plant as well. So again, part of the issue for Fort Nelson is just having a holistic ability to use the tree, and the pellet plant gives us that opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just keep going down kind of in order here. Are these plants run in a different way than is planned for Fort Nelson? So I'm assuming she's talking about the other plants you'd spoken of there, Brian.
So again, our plant will be run, and one of the things you do when you make pellets is you dry the material, and a lot of plants would use a carbon fuel, so either natural gas or propane or oil to dry the fuel, or to dry the wood, which then gets turned into pellets. So our plant is different in the sense that it uses this belt dryer, and that belt dryer is going to use the waste bark and waste woody debris that comes through the system, and we'll use that to dry the wood and then turn it into pellets.
Okay, will the pellets be shipped via intermodal or in hopper cars?
Our expectation today is that they'll be shipped in hopper cars, and obviously loaded on site and then unloaded at the shipping terminal either in Vancouver or Prince Rupert.
Brian, is the goal of Peak to keep all the wood cut in Fort Nelson for processing? And will more processing plants be built so wood does not leave Fort Nelson?
What we've talked about, Bev, is that in phase one, in order to get the project up and running, we will be selling logs to other players, and I call that other sawmilling folks that are south of Fort Nelson. So that allows us to get the plant up and running, and also create the economics that make this business viable. What we hope and what we believe is that that people will look at Fort Nelson as a place to invest in and develop either sawmilling or veneer or plywood or whatever capacity. And our observation, and Rick's seen a lot of the incoming inquiries, as have I. We're talking to a number of players in the forest industry that are expressing an interest in doing something different. We're also talking to a Chinese company that wants high quality aspen veneer. Again, some of these things have come to fruition because of our contacts in the industry, but as people have heard about Fort Nelson and have understood that there's going to be an opportunity to utilize some of this material, these opportunities are becoming available. So we hope to see them happen, and we hope to see them happen prior to the construction of the pellet plant. And if the pellet plant, as a result of being able to do some of these opportunities earlier on, if it moved from being a 600,000 ton plant to 500 or 400, we'd welcome that opportunity. And I say that because ultimately these higher value opportunities pay for the logging and pay for us being able to, well, we'll benefit from being able to use their residual fiber from either canting or veneer or whatever out of their processes.
Thanks, Brian. I'm just going to apologize to people now. I know we had some issues with my chat box showing up and the yellow screen showing up. Honestly, I am worried that if I tried to fix it too much, I was going to mess something else up. So sorry about that. So Brian, can you speak to the Wood Pellets Association position on the Fort Nelson Pellet Project?
You know, we've had a number of discussions with the Wood Pellet Association, and we've also talked to other members. We're a little puzzled by the response that they have. It doesn't necessarily make sense for us, and I think there's some aspects of what they do that other people in the pellet business, as I just mentioned, who are using other fuels to dry their wood in order to make pellets. We think if you did a close examination of the science behind what they're talking about, I'm not sure that they'd find themselves in the best position. And I think, frankly, some of the points that they've made, we agree with, to the extent that there's a higher and better use for the wood, and we can find it and bring it to Fort Nelson. We're 100% in favor of that.
Okay, Brian, why as the first order of business did you apply for the transfer of a forest tenure, the primary fiber of which you will not be using? Why not apply for a volume to more suitably supply the pellet venture?
So first of all, I think that question is asking, the primary fiber that we're thinking of for the pellet plant is the deciduous volume. And the forest in Fort Nelson is roughly a 60-40 split, 60 deciduous, 40 coniferous. And so we're looking for the primary fiber of deciduous. So we need both we're proposing another tenure that would be applied for through the Fort Nelson First Nation, plus this tenure from Canfor in order to supply the business. So in reality, the roughly 2 million cubic meters that we're talking about is the Canfor tenure plus additional tenures, including the community forest. And again, we'd use their deciduous, all of which needs to find a home.
The Wood Pellet Association does not support the type of harvesting you are proposing using whole trees. So where are you going to sell the pellets? As
was mentioned in the presentation, the market that we're expecting to sell to is Japan, and again, we'll be getting the appropriate certifications in order to do such.
The next question, oh, sorry, Brian, I was just going to say the next question kind of follows. Does Peak have signed agreements with Japanese customers right now?
Not yet.
Sorry, did I cut you off there? Were you about to add something?
Nope, that was...
Okay. Where is Peak Renewables in negotiations with CN? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, again, some of these discussions are somewhat fluid, but I'd say we're having very fruitful discussions with CN, and we look forward to the outcome, and obviously a successful outcome to those discussions means that the pellet plant, or anything for that matter, in Fort Nelson can get developed.
Okay, what percentage of deciduous and coniferous?
As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, the ratio of wood deciduous is 60% and coniferous is 40%. So this is back to the mix. We're primarily using the deciduous volume in the pellet plant, and we're using the tops of the coniferous volumes, what we call a pulp log bed.
Thanks. The stat you mentioned of 300 jobs in the project, would this be all local jobs, or will many be out of town workers brought in to work on the project? Just wanting to understand the potential of employment for local residents, Fort Nelson First Nation in the region.
So our clear desire will be to hire locally. I'm not sure that initially we'll be able to find all the people, particularly in the harvesting capacity, in the local area. But so we're talking probably 360 or so jobs. And like I say, on the harvesting side, we've been talking to a couple of local contractors already that are interested in working with us and for us. And our preference is to move in that direction. The Fort Nelson First Nation has capacity that, again, we're looking forward to bringing to a higher level. It's been mostly utilized in the oil and gas industry, so we hope to help them move into the forestry side of the business. And then for the operating jobs in the plant itself, clearly we want to see people that are based out of the community. So in fact, all of the jobs, if we had our preference, all of them would come out of the community.
Why do you have to pay 30 million for the license? Why couldn't Fort Nelson First Nation go to the province and ask for the license to be canceled and apply for the wood themselves?
That's a good question. Thank you. Thank you. I think that license has been sitting there, I think, for roughly 12 years in Canfor's name. And Canfor hasn't, at this stage, been willing to do something with it. And obviously to this stage, the province hasn't been willing to cancel it. I'm not sure, and James, you may be able to comment whether the Fort Nelson First Nation has approached the province on that basis. But we think it's a fair price. We think it's a business transaction, and I guess the details of that transaction are obviously confidential. Canfor didn't have to sell us the license if they didn't want to, and so we appreciate that they did, and it helps this project move forward.
Brian, I'm just going to remind everybody that we want to make sure that we're being respectful in all the questions that are being asked here. I'm going to allow this one to stand. Maybe you can just chat a little bit about the relationship with Fort Nelson First Nations and why you've approached them in this arrangement.
James, did you want to just talk about the 30 million first? Good. Can you unmute him?
Oh, do I have to unmute him again? Oh, sorry. James, I'm going to maybe suggest you stay unmuted. Here we go. Sorry, James. There you go.
That's great, Bev. No problem whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that question is just that FNFN is approaching the Crown with respect to both the community forest, obviously is a big tenure development interest, as well as a number of FNFN standalone tenures, as well as the project tenure as well. And so a large part of the tenures that are involved in FNFN's forestry business and operations, as well as the project, will have some FNFN involvement either as holders, as partners, or as FNFN ownership on the tenures as well. And so I think that's just something that is synergistic with FNFN's wish to both develop some opportunities for itself, its members, and the local community, as well as continue to fulfill their role as stewards of the land. And I see that there's a couple of questions there about why is FNFN being involved, or why is FNFN getting dibs on tenures? And really, this just all goes back to the historical fact of FNFN being the original inhabitants of this territory and agreeing to share this territory by way of treaty with non-First Nations people. And it's just that basic fact that needs to be remembered, when I see some of the why should FNFN get this or that kind of thing. It just goes back to that original historical fact, and I think that's all I'm going to say about that.
And I do have to say that we were very proud to make an arrangement, a deal for what it's worth with the Fort Nelson First Nation. We think it's the way things should be done, both today and in the future. So very happy to work with the Fort Nelson First Nation.
Sorry, I got to get back to where we were here. Is there a plan to include the production of, and I'm hoping this is the right word, torrefied or stream exploded pellets in the plant's future?
So that's a good question, Mike. Just there's been a lot of people that have tried doing this. We think there's I think their company's named Arbaflame. That is looking out of Norway, that has done one success, what we believe is somewhat successful. And they also get some chemical out of the production at the same time, which makes the whole process economic. They're building a second plant, we believe, in North America. And we're interested in following that technology. We're also looking at a number of other technologies, but so far there really hasn't, and we've looked at a lot of them, probably about 10 or 15 torrefied pellets or steam exploded pellets, none of which have been economic to this stage. So again, we were interested in it, but so far we haven't seen anything that makes sense beyond what we're looking at in terms of this proposal.
Skipping down a little bit, outside of the two parties involved, has a third-party environmental assessment been completed? I would guess I would add, what environmental assessments do you still need to do?
We'll need to go through the province in terms of environmental approvals.
Yeah, the other thing that I can say is with respect to the land management framework, there's a team of, well, obviously there's Indigenous knowledge holders that have been involved in that, but there's also a team of ecological consultants that are involved in that work, as well as a professional forestry team as well. And that's also true of analysis that FNFN has done with respect to the overall timber supply in the setting of the annual allowable cut that happened in the summer of 2019. There was a study done that essentially involved, again, a team of both professional foresters as well as ecologists working together to analyze the sustainability issues of the timber supply as well.
Brian, can you please speak to the monopoly Peak will hold over the local forest if the total cut articulated by Peak is granted? How will this affect the other proponents who have submitted an interest in a portion of that same cut?
So the way it stands today, so the Can 4 cut is 553,000 cubic meters. The proposed tenure that would be associated with the project would be another just over 1.1 million cubic meters for a total of about 1.7 million cubic meters. The community forest has tenure. There's a bunch of other small tenures that are have been granted to a variety of players. And then above and beyond that, there's going to be I expect opportunities for BCTS and also, so in some way, shape or form, there's about 2.8 million cubic meters of availability of fiber in the Fort Nelson TSA. And the plant itself is about 1.7. So there's still about 1 million to 1.1 million available to a variety of other players.
Are you saying that 1.2 million cubic meters of deciduous is good for nothing but pellets? I think you've kind of already answered this a little bit, Brian, but maybe you can elaborate a little.
Yeah, so we're not saying that 0.2 million is certainly has that rot that we were describing. And if we were able to find somebody that's able to turn the higher quality aspen into something like veneer or into furniture stock, that would be the higher and better use that we think would make sense. And again, as I said earlier, if that turned into a pellet plant that's somewhat not the size that it is, and the opportunity makes sense, we'd be certainly all for it.
Why would Peak not secure a local industry for the prime wood or the coniferous before, or at least parallel to planning a pellet plant? If you're taking care of the waste, wouldn't there be much greater interest in developing a manufacture of the high value tenure project? Wouldn't it be easy to pitch?
Well, I think when we started with this idea, this was the idea. There was nothing else on the table at the time. And what has happened since then is a number of players have started getting more interested in the manufacture of high value products out of there. But I'd also say it's not the amount of coniferous or volume of the high quality aspirin isn't necessarily such that it immediately looks like it makes economic sense, which is why somebody's going to have to perhaps set up a small specialty operation, or like a veneer, which may make more sense. But again, we haven't seen the final economics of that to confirm that.
Peak has committed to sell logs to Canfor as part of the tenure sale. Can you tell us how many years of selling and shipping logs you've committed to?
Yeah, so we've committed for a period of time to sell them logs, and that is part of our commercial discussions with Canfor.
The second half of that question, Brian, was if you can tell us how many years you've committed to. Is that something you're able to share?
And that's, as I mentioned, that's part of our commercial discussions with Canfor.
How will Peak and Canfor deal with impacts to trapline holders?
As Rick talked about and James Tate talked about, the land use management plan and deals with that. And also part of what we'll be doing is consulting with the various people that utilize the land. So I don't know if James or Rick want to add to that.
I can just add a little bit, Brian. So within the land management framework, there is a trapping value that is being looked at and spatialized around the harvesting plan. But of course, trapline holders have their own vested interest and Crown consultation process that happens with them. But Peak, I know will be committed to engaging with individual trapline holders going forward as well. And I actually shouldn't just say Peak, but the proponent really is Peak and FNFN together.
Thanks, James. Is there any chance the Peak would walk away from this project? If so, what would be those conditions?
What we need to be able to do is lock up the fiber that makes this project viable. So number one. Number two is get a market. Number three is rail, and then finally financing. So there's really 4 conditions that all need to be met in order for this project to effectively get built. And we're well on our way under every aspect of that.
A follow-up question, the increase in AAC or annual allowable cut in a 20-year harvesting plan that is clear cutting, has the sustainability of that been ground truthed?
Ground truth.
Sorry.
I think Rick might want to just discuss the 20-year harvesting plan and the ground truthing that's going on.
Do I need to unmute him? Hang on. Let's find Rick.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, first off, the overall harvest levels are as per the 2019 AAC determination that was done by the province. So, those total harvest limits, if you will, are dictated by the province, and we'll be working well within those. At the same time, we've been working with IFS in Prince George, doing some very detailed timber supply modeling work. It's a great big computer simulation model that takes into account the total area of the land base of the TSA, and subtracting from that all the land that is not currently forested, and then subtracting from that all the many resource constraints that limit the amount of operability that occurs across the landscape. Layered onto all that is the forest inventory and the rate at which the forests are growing. And that basically results in a calculation of an allowable annual cut. And we model our needs, our volume needs relative to the allowable annual cut. And then we go through a 20-year process whereby we're spatializing that harvest footprint just to make sure that we can operate within all those constraints and still achieve the volumes that are necessary to run the mill. So that's the process by which we're doing that work, and that work has been proving out to be favorable given the scale and scope of this project.
Maybe if I can just ask another question that I actually had come in to me personally earlier today, and it's sort of around the same thing, is will the public be seeing the 20-year logging plan, and to see the areas that you're planning on logging and to show the sustainability of that?
And I would say the answer to that will be yes. Once we're comfortable with the product that we've produced, and we feel comfortable that we've successfully navigated our way through all the resource constraints, there will be an opportunity for people to view that.
Okay, what lengths of timber will be hauled from clear cuts to log sort yards, and will the road infrastructure support the extra traffic and weights?
The lengths that will be going into the pellet plant will be, I believe it's going to be cut to length harvesting systems, and meaning we're cutting individual logs manufactured to certain length specifications out in the woods and then hauled to the mill. And I believe we're going to be looking at 16 and 20-foot lengths to match the size of the thawing ponds that are currently in the mill. So that's what I would say about that. And are the road systems adequate to handle the loads that we're going to be hauling? That's an interesting question. We're still toiling over what the length of the harvesting season is going to look like. I know back in the day when Canfor was there, they operated strictly in frozen conditions and on frozen roads, and you could haul off highway sized loads on those roads, and similarly on the pavement you could get your winter weight tolerances. So the view that we have is that there may be more opportunity to operate in non-frozen conditions. The extent to which we can do that is unknown at this point, but we're hopeful that we can do a certain amount of, perhaps summer, late summer harvesting when soil conditions are really dry, and we can have, the trucks on the resource roads, without inflicting damage on those roads. So I hope that answers that question.
Will the pellet facility purchase mill residuals at fair market value?
Yes.
Short answer. Can you show us the harvesting plan map in advance of the 10-year transfer approval? Now, I think the deadline for comments to the minister is this Wednesday.
So I don't believe we're there.
Yeah, it's still going through a number of iterations, Bev.
Okay. A follow-up question. Until today, Peak has indicated a need for 2 million meters cubed in annual allowable cut. The total available from the ministry has until today been held to be 2.5, 20%. 500,000 million cubic meters is held for private timber sales under the BCTS and is not available for a secure tenure. The community forest, 200,000 cubic meters falls outside. I'm hoping you guys are reading this as well. Outside the BCTS allowance, so must therefore form part of the original 2 million Peak has until today said they needed. Is Peak now changing their total need for fiber?
I wouldn't say that we're changing our need for fiber, Abigail. So a couple of things that when you look at the numbers here, the AAC has been quoted at 2.5 million, and I believe the community forest is above and beyond that 2.5 million, so it's actually 2.8 million. So that is actually the number that the AAC actually is 2.8 as opposed to the 2.5 that's commonly quoted. And our expectation, and we're not it's not an exact science today, but so we've assumed a range of fiber that we need. On the bottom end is somewhere around 1.8 million cubic meters, and on the top end is 2 million. And in that 2 million, we've assumed that we would that out of the community forest, they'd probably want us to utilize the deciduous volumes that are associated with it. Again, where that ends up, we'll see. Again, we've had a number of discussions. They clearly, as we agree, is like to see the use of that wood within the community, both the coniferous and if there is an opportunity on the deciduous side as well. And we have no issues with that for sure.
I think this is actually the final question I'm seeing in the chat. I don't know if you see others. Because there are so many uncertainties as to whether the pellet plant will be built, will you wait until that point before commencing harvesting? And maybe Brian, just before you answer that one, I'll add that I had a question earlier today as about an FSP.
So the FSP is the Forest Stewardship Plan, and Rick, can you tell me the status of that one?
The FSP that was being generated by Canfor in collaboration with BC Timber Sales is, I believe, with the district manager under internal review prior to approval. We are of the understanding that approval is not too far in the future here.
And so one of the questions here is because there's so many uncertainties as to whether it will be built, will we wait? So first of all, we need the stewardship plan in place before you can do any harvesting on either the Canfor tenure or on I believe the community forest tenure, or on the proposed project tenure. So until that is approved, there's a very limited ability to do any harvesting in the Fort Nelson area. And the second thing about that is we've enabled, I'd say, some very small scale harvesting off some private land today. And we might look at some other small scale harvesting, looking at some forest licenses to cut that would be issued by the more for fire guarding. So we'll hopefully be able to do a little bit of that. Most of it is to determine and to develop capability in the area. So we're doing some training with the Echo Dene. We're utilizing some local contractor capacity as we speak, and so we're just looking at what does it take to do some minimal harvesting as we work towards getting the pellet plant, the whole pellet plant built.
I see we have another question there. Will the sort yard log sales at some point be open for bid to other companies? If so, when?
Yeah, so we're Rick Jacquard on there. If you want to buy some logs down the road, there's a guy to talk to. We're happy to talk to anybody in terms of what the opportunities are around utilizing the logs.
Scroll just happened here. We have somebody here that wanted to point out, Peter, clarification: hauling logs out of Fort Nelson currently is not peak, as this has been seen as a concern in the community. So the logs that you just mentioned being purchased off of some private land, or the logs that we've seen going down the highway recently, has that been peak?
We've been involved with it, Bev, for sure.
Would Peak support an application by the First Nation to the ministry to cancel the can for tenure and revert that volume to the general pool and contribute to the overall volume needed for the total project? Or would Peak consider pulling their application currently before the tenures branch in order to get more input and communicate? Oh, sorry, Brian, have you just gone through and read that all? In order to get more input and communication with the public. This is the first real meeting with the general public, and more communication seems needed to secure details not presently being shared.
Yeah, so first of all, I think the details, we are being completely transparent in our discussions, aside from things that are that we're not able to talk about from a commercial point of view. This is more than our first real meeting with the general public. And we're happy to have more meetings as needed, but I don't think it really changes the desire to keep this project moving forward and getting this tenure transfer done.
What percentage of the cut will have to be reforested, if any? So are you going to be looking at a silviculture requirements?
It all has to be reforested, Bev. That's one of the requirements of the Minister of Forests.
So both deciduous and coniferous have to be planted?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. It is understood Peak purchased the CAN4 buildings. What is being done at those sites at this time?
The main thing is just making sure that the asset stays in good shape, the buildings, and we've been cleaning up a little bit there, but aside from that, nothing really.
Okay, and I'm just noting that we are sitting just about 10 after 8. So if there's any kind of last final questions, or Brian, if you have any anything you'd like to add here at the end?
Well, again, we're privileged to be, I think, going to be part of the Fort Nelson and the Fort Nelson community. We're looking forward to being there. It's one of the last areas of the province that actually has some fiber available, and we're looking forward to be part of the community. Bev, I want to thank you for hosting this public meeting. Very much appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody that has had the interest to join us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and I'll echo that, Brian. I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk to the community. I think obviously we need to do more of these in the evening because we had a great turnout here tonight. So people, it's definitely something the community is interested in learning more about. I just see there's one more question come in, and I actually think it's a pretty fair question that we should maybe get an answer to before we leave. Well, there's two. When will the next public meeting be? And you and we can certainly discuss whether or not you would like me to host another one. And what is the timeline for starting the retrofit of the mill, and when are you expecting to start a hiring fair?
And I think, as I mentioned earlier, we need to get those 4 things done, which are the fiber, the market, the railway, and finally the financing, and then we start building. We'd like to be doing it today, but some of these processes have taken a bit longer than perhaps some of us have expected.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, James and Rick, for your input here tonight. Really do appreciate it. And info@peakrenewables.ca. That will get, if people have questions or they want to reach out to you directly. And the website is peakrenewables.ca as well. So I would encourage you to contact Peak directly if you have more questions that haven't been answered here. And we'll make sure that we let people know when we're holding the next open house or virtual open house.
Thank you, Bev.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.